Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett. Amna Nawaz is away. On the NewsHour tonight, the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates once again, but concerns over inflation and the incoming Trump administration raise questions about future cuts. In Syria, a report from the site of an infamous chemical weapons attack by the Assad regime as people search for their dead. And despite the widespread negative effects of alcohol abuse, why one of the most promising treatments is barely being used.
It's really tragic. We have a medication that helps people, and less than 2% probably receive it who could really benefit from it.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by.
In 1995, two friends set out to make wireless coverage accessible to all. With no long-term contracts, nationwide coverage, and 100% U.S.-based customer support. Consumer Cellular. Freedom calls.
The Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The Federal Reserve cut its benchmark rate today for the third consecutive time, once again by 1/4 point. Many are hoping the cut will have a clear effect on interest rates, what banks and other lenders charge and what consumers pay. But the Fed also suggested there won't be as many interest rate cuts in the year ahead as it once planned. Chairman Jerome Powell told reporters today's cut wasn't an easy decision because of higher inflation in recent months.
Today was a closer call, but we decided it was the right call because we thought it was the best decision to foster achievement of both of our goals, maximum employment and price stability. We see the risks as two-sided, moving too slowly and needlessly undermine economic activity in the labor market, or move too quickly and needlessly undermine our progress on inflation. So we're trying to steer between those two risks. And on balance, we decided to go ahead with a further cut.
After the announcement, the markets plunged, with the Dow falling more than 1,100 points. The NASDAQ dropped more than 700 points. The S&P 500 also ended sharply lower. For more on today's decision and what could be ahead, we're joined now by Nick Timiraos, Chief Economics Correspondent for The Wall Street Journal. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So there had been some question leading up to today about whether the Fed would move forward with another rate cut, given that inflation has been stickier than many Fed officials had hoped. But give us a sense of why the chairman went ahead and moved forward with this third consecutive rate cut.
Well, the justification was much the same as the last time. Inflation has come down, and Fed officials had raised interest rates so much in the last couple of years that they thought they were really standing on the neck of the economy if they stayed there for too long. And so they still want to restrain economic activity, but not quite so much as they were. I think what was interesting today was that it did sound a little half-hearted. If you go back 3 months ago when they cut by a larger half point, it seemed as if this was really going to be the start of a move lower. And today, Jay Powell sounded like someone putting up the yellow light, if not the red light, to further rate cuts. And as you noted, markets just didn't like that.
Yeah, on that point of him putting up a yellow light, as you said, I mean, he also said that they're going to rein in the number of cuts in 2025. What's the thinking there?
Well, I think that reflects less confidence that inflation is going to keep coming down to their 2% goal. He was asked about whether policy changes from President-elect Trump might have also contributed to that. If you look at what Trump was proposing on tariffs and immigration, you could have a little bit of kick back up in goods prices. You could see wages go up if you deport a lot of workers. And so those are developments that had been working to help inflation come down. If you think you're going to have more disruption on those fronts, then maybe you're going to take a more cautious stance to cutting interest rates going forward.
So Fed officials are weighing the potential impact of Trump policies on the economy and planning accordingly?
Well, I think you have to take it into account, at least how you see the risks that inflation won't come down as much as it has or as much as you think that it will. When Powell was asked about it today, he said some officials took it on board, some didn't. So it's hard to tell just how much that's driving the change in the outlook. But the analysts I spoke to after the meeting said there hasn't been enough of a change in the economy in the last couple of months to warrant the shift in the inflation forecast that they produced today. And so it does seem like they're taking on board more Trump-related policy change.
So to simplify the Fed strategy, it really seems like it's a wait-and-see approach. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's right. Recalibrate rates and wait. And we'll see. They'll come back in January. They have another meeting in March. If the labor market holds up here, then the Fed could be on hold.
How much of a difference will these 3 consecutive cuts make in terms of the prices that consumers see? And frankly, with mortgage rates, I mean, mortgage rates have actually gone up despite these interest rate cuts.
Well, I think that was another reason you saw markets react the way that they did today, Jeff. If you had thought we were going to see a sequence of interest rate cuts, maybe mortgage rates would come down more. The Fed now saying, hold on, we're not sure what the normal rate is in this post-pandemic economy. Maybe it's higher. The normal rate would be higher than it was last decade when mortgage rates really only got as high as 5%. So if we're not going back to a normal interest rate structure that we had before the pandemic, mortgage rates could be higher. And if you were anticipating that your mortgage rate would go down, maybe you're going to buy a house next year, you're rethinking that now. Wall Street's rethinking that now.
And lastly, what's your take on this market performance? Should we read too much into that, or is that potentially something that we shouldn't do, given that the markets have really been soaring recently?
Yeah, markets go up and markets go down. So I think, today they were reacting to kind of a level change, something that they were not expecting from the Fed, even though Fed officials had clearly been voicing murmurs of concern that maybe they weren't going to keep cutting interest rates. We'll have to see how this shakes out.
Nick Timiraos of the Wall Street Journal. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Today's other headlines start in California, which has declared a state of emergency over a bird flu outbreak among dairy cattle. California has seen the most dairy cattle and human infections since the first U.S. cases were detected earlier this year. In a statement, Governor Gavin Newsom called the declaration a targeted action to ensure government agencies have the resources and flexibility they need to respond quickly to the outbreak. That came as the CDC announced the country's first severe case of bird flu in a human, involving a person who's been hospitalized in Louisiana. More than 60 human infections have been reported this year, but health officials say there's no evidence of human-to-human transmission, and the risk to the public remains low. In Russia, authorities say they have detained a suspect in yesterday's killing of a senior general in Moscow. Russian TV released video claiming to show the suspect's confession. Security officials did not release a name, but say the suspect is an Uzbek citizen born in 1995. In the video, he says he acted on the order of the Ukrainian Security Service. The video has not been independently verified. The attack killed Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov and his assistant outside of his Moscow apartment. Kirillov was the head of Russia's Chemical, Radiological, and Biological Weapons Unit. Russia's foreign ministry said today they plan to address the killing at the United Nations, and they vowed retribution.
Постоянное представительство России при ООН поднимет вопрос.
The permanent mission of Russia to the UN will raise the issue of the committed terrorist attack during the UN Security Council meeting. We are confident that all the organizers and perpetrators of the murder of Igor Kirillov will be found, punished, whoever it may be, wherever they are.
Ukraine had opened a criminal investigation against Kirillov on Monday, accusing him of directing the use of banned chemical weapons in Russia's war against Ukraine. Russia has accused Ukraine of doing so as well. Both countries have denied any wrongdoing. In the Middle East, Israel's military is preparing another offensive in central Gaza and is telling Palestinians to evacuate the area. Gazans in the Barej refugee camp are urged to relocate to a humanitarian zone on the coast where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have already been displaced. Meantime, Israeli airstrikes across northern Gaza killed at least 20 people overnight. It all comes as talks seem to inch closer to a ceasefire and a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. And that's fueled cautious optimism within Gaza.
I hope the talks are sincere this time and not random like every other time. We want the war to truly end because we are exhausted and can't take it anymore.
Meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in court today taking the stand in his corruption trials. He's the first sitting Israeli leader to ever stand trial as a criminal defendant. The Prime Minister has been charged with fraud, taking bribes, and breaching the public trust. He's called the charges against him idiotic. A British teenager charged in a stabbing rampage this summer remained silent during his court appearance today as a clerk entered not guilty pleas on his behalf. 18-year-old Axel Rudakubana was charged earlier this year with 3 counts of murder and 10 counts of attempted murder. He received additional charges when poison and an al-Qaeda training manual were found at his home. The July attack happened in a town north of Liverpool at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. All of those killed were young girls under the age of 10. His trial is scheduled for January 20th. The U.S. military has repatriated 3 prisoners from Guantanamo Bay in Cuba back to their home countries. 2 of them are from Malaysia. They pleaded guilty to charges related to the 2002 bombings in Bali and will serve out additional 5-year sentences in their home country. The 3rd returned to Kenya after being held for 17 years. He was accused of belonging to a branch of al-Qaeda, though he was never charged. Their departure leaves 27 prisoners at Guantanamo. 15 are currently waiting for release after being cleared of wrongdoing years ago. The EPA approved 2 requests from California today aimed at banning sales of new gasoline-powered cars by the year 2035. The first would require that 80% of new cars sold in the state by that time be electric. 20% must be plug-in hybrid models. The second rule would cut pollution from diesel-powered trucks in the state by 90% in the coming years. The decision has national implications, with at least 11 other states following California's lead on stricter emissions, but it also sets up a clash with the incoming Trump administration, which has sought to reduce auto emission standards. And the top gun of the silver screen is now a military hero in real life. The U.S. Navy has presented Tom Cruise with the Distinguished Public Service Award, the branch's highest civilian honor. His action-packed role as Maverick in the original Top Gun and its sequel made, quote, outstanding contributions to the Navy and the Marine Corps. The 1986 hit drove a spike in enlistment, so much so that the Navy set up recruitment tables outside some theaters. Cruise said he was proud to receive what he called the extraordinary acknowledgement of his work. Still to come on the NewsHour, presidential politics puts a major funding bill that would avoid a government shutdown in jeopardy. The incoming chair of the Progressive Caucus on efforts to rebrand the Democratic Party. And the American astronauts stranded in space face another delay before their return to Earth.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Not even 24 hours after congressional leaders released a 1,500-page bill that would keep the government funded for the next 3 months, the threat of a shutdown at the end of this week is back. Republicans in Congress are being pressured by the president-elect and vice president-elect to block the bill. On social media, Mr. Trump said Congress should instead pass a streamlined spending bill, and he told Republicans to get smart and tough. Congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins has been following the latest. So Lisa, 3 days until government funding runs out, What's the deal with this bill? How much jeopardy is this facing?
We joked last night about deja vu, but I want to tell you that today has been extraordinary, and the stakes here are very high. This bill is now really on the verge. In fact, you can pretty much say this bill is falling apart, and it's being taken off the table by Republicans. Now, I want to explain a little bit about why. There are a host of issues that Republicans don't like in it, that the money for disaster relief is not paid for is one, that it would include some cost of living raises for members of Congress. Also, it would exempt members of Congress from Obamacare. There's also money for seasonal and migrant workers who are here legally, but some Republicans don't like it. But overall, there's a process concern here. They say they weren't consulted. They didn't have enough time. So I'll show you what's been happening today from members of Congress across a wide spectrum of members. Now, if you look at this, Chip Roy, Republican, known as a conservative, he wrote vote no. Nicole Malliotakis from New York, I'll be voting no. She's more moderate. Then we've got Representative Golden of Maine. He will be voting against it. He is a Democrat. So really almost the entire spectrum here saying they had a problem with this bill. It is a political disaster for Speaker Mike Johnson. And another factor here is that Trump is speaking out, but that came after an important figure in the Trump world, Elon Musk, tweeted out that he was against it. So what we're seeing here is a problem for Mike Johnson, but also a case of who is really driving the ship here, not just for Republicans, but of government itself.
These Republicans who came out today and said they wouldn't vote for it, weren't these folks already planning not to vote for this bill to begin with?
No. There were more people who generally would vote for a CR today who said that they won't. And that momentum gathered as things went along.
So what's the path forward such that anyone knows it right now?
Right. Well, Republicans who have a problem today would like 72 hours before they are passing any bill. That's usual procedure, but we have the deadline Friday. So what we expect now is potentially the House Rules Committee, I'm told, may meet tonight. There may be a very small bill that just kicks funding down the road. We don't know for how long. We don't know what it will look like. They don't know what it will look like. But I want to stress why this all matters. It's not just about funding, though obviously that is a lot at stake as we enter Christmas time and Hanukkah. This bill also contained $100 billion in disaster funding. Let's remind people about the hurricanes that hit this country in the last few months. Milton, Helene, we're talking about $200 billion in damage, and it's across agencies, across many states. This bill would have helped with that. There was also some drug price reform in here that members have worked for years to try and get in this bill. That would be off the table. And in general, this is a test for Republicans, can they govern, and also for Democrats. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, came out a short time ago and said he thinks that Republicans are now trying to shut down government. Chances are his votes will be needed in order to keep government funded.
Yeah. Well, as this has been unfolding, there are Republicans in Congress who are accusing the former Congresswoman Liz Cheney of witness tampering. And this is all spelled out in a new report. Bring us up to speed.
Let me explain this. This report came from the House Administration Committee, which is generally handled January 6th for Republicans yesterday, led by Barry Loudermilk. Now, when they put out this report as part of their press release, they really singled out Liz Cheney, and in their 128 pages, they accused her of witness tampering, and they went out of their way to say they think she should be criminally charged. This is a unique set of circumstances. The January 6th committee that Cheney was the vice chair of was passed by Congress. It was a part of Congress. Congress has the right to set its own rules. This is unprecedented. Now, Liz Cheney has fired back in an unequivocal response to this. She said that this report intentionally disregards the truth, fabricates lies, and has defamatory allegations. Jeff, this also raises serious separation of power issues, and there's a question of watch Liz Cheney, because if the Trump administration and his allies target her for prosecution, that's a very serious situation. There's an argument for her to be pardoned, some say.
Yeah, Donald Trump's influence present in this as well. And add to all of that, all of this news that you're tracking, the House Ethics Committee voted to release its report into Matt Gaetz.
Let me take a deep breath, because I know all of this is quite a lot to process, but there are sort of some threads that tie it all, which are sort of threads of of chaos and questions of institutions working or not working. The House Ethics Committee, reporting from CNN and AP, said that they met secretly and did vote to release that report on former Congressman Matt Gaetz. He is under investigation for sexual misconduct, including potentially with a minor, as well as campaign finance issues, and also other inappropriate conduct. So the reporting is that the committee, which meets in secret usually, secretly did vote to release this report, and the expectation is from this reporting that it will come out in coming days after Congress leaves town. But that all links back, of course, to whether Congress can figure out this funding deal. You know, I think they will. It's in everyone's interest to keep government funded, but how messy will it be? And is Speaker Johnson's speakership on the line? I think it is.
I know you've also been reporting on how Democrats are preparing for total Republican control here in Washington. What are they telling you?
Right. This is an important moment for them to figure out their strategy as well. And, you know, there are just a handful of weeks before that change. Democrats themselves have been at odds over their future direction during the new Trump era. But today speaks to the extraordinary circumstance Democrats are in. House Republicans unable to pass legislation on their own. I talked about all of that a short time ago with freshman Congressman Greg Casar. He's a 35-year-old from Austin, Texas, and was just elected the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He'll be the youngest person ever to lead that group come January. Thank you so much for joining me, Congressman Casar. I want to start with where we are today. It seems as though the proposed continuing resolution may be falling apart. What do you think this means right now?
I think we're beginning to see the chaos and billionaire corruption of the Trump era. I mean, Trump tried to campaign talking about how he was going to help working people and deal with corruption. And I knew that pretty immediately he was going to betray his own message and his own voters. So essentially, for folks who haven't heard, Republicans and Democrats were negotiating to come together to keep essential government services open here at the end of the year. And then suddenly, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, full of many of the worst ideas in the world, basically ordered House Republicans to shut it down. And he said he wanted to shut it down over quote unquote Democrat priorities. But those priorities are disaster funding to rebuild places like North Carolina that got hit by these awful storms, and funding to make sure that small farmers don't go out of business because of things like droughts and tornadoes and other disasters. And these are things that aren't just being asked for by Democratic members. In fact, a lot of these things really impact a lot of Republican areas and Republican constituents. So Democrats said, let's keep the government open. Let's make sure people can access services like their veteran services and Social Security over the holiday. And Donald Trump is basically ordering for all of it to get shut down at the behest of his billionaire friend Elon Musk, who's kind of cosplaying co-president right now.
You had one of the largest ideological caucuses for Democrats, the Progressive Caucus. What do you want progressives to stand for?
The Progressive Caucus is best prepared to help reform and transform the Democratic Party after our losses in this election. It is Progressive Caucus members that are authentic leaders, that are unbossed, who've been willing to stand up to corporate power. And I think what a lot of disaffected voters wanted to hear from the Democratic Party in this election was that we would be willing to stand up to the Wall Street CEOs that are jacking up housing prices. They wanted to hear Democrats say we're willing to stand up to the big corporations that are jacking up prices at the grocery store. And it's Progressive Caucus members that have been willing to do that in the past. And I hope that we can lead the Democratic Party into leaning into those issues where we're popular, not just with Democratic voters, but standing up to Wall Street, standing up to special interests and corruption is popular with this independent voters, with people that don't traditionally vote, and actually with a lot of America's conservatives. So I think the Progressive Caucus can help lead us in that kind of direction, take us away from some of the culture wars that we see Republicans starting. Republicans try to divert our attention towards those culture wars. And I think the Progressive Caucus instead should pivot towards those economic issues where the vast majority of the country agrees with us.
As you're touching on, voters, this election clearly moved to the right, you know, by different degrees in different parts of the country, but it was every single swing state for sure in the presidential election. Did Democrats lose sight of what voters wanted and wanted to hear, or did voters just turn away from Democrats?
Look, I don't think that this is a question necessarily of left or right. In talking to voters in swing states where I was campaigning for the vice president, in talking to swing voters across Texas, voters were looking for authenticity, somebody in their corner standing up and fighting for them. And so I don't think that Democrats are going to succeed if we keep running the same playbook.
Are you, Congressman, if I can interrupt really quickly, are you saying that Democrats should work on their authenticity?
I think the Democratic brand has been damaged. In the past, people said that the number one thing they associated positively with the Democratic Party was that we are the party of working people. And that holds up in our data from the post-World War II era all up until close to around 2010, 2012. And that's when we started losing that part of our brand. And we've got to get back to that because voters can disagree on a variety of cultural and social issues. I mean, we've got that in my own family. I'm sure you've got that in your own neighborhood around your Christmas or Thanksgiving table. But back in the day, the way Democrats held the coalition together was to say you might agree on this social issue or disagree on that one, but we're all united behind a party that's willing to stand up to the powerful in support of working people. I saw this when I was a labor organizer before I was an elected official. I used to organize on construction sites where you had immigrant Spanish-speaking workers on the same construction site as a fifth-generation Texan. We were bringing people together across race, across culture, across ideology, but everybody was fighting for a raise. And when you have a Democratic Party that does the same thing, is fighting for a raise for working people, then people are willing, I think, to be a part of our big tent. And I think we've started to lose that, and we've got to regain that.
Congressman Greg Casar of Texas, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Syrians are celebrating their hard-won freedoms throughout the nation, but that joy is tempered by the absence of so many, imprisoned and never heard from again, disappeared in the night, and murdered in foreboding torture chambers. In some ways, Syria is a land of ghosts, and the job of speaking for the dead now falls to their loved ones and to the new Syrian government. Our Layla Molana Allen reports now from the suburbs of Damascus. A warning, some of the images in this story are disturbing.
Bringing up the bodies. As the full scale of the Assad regime's crimes against its people is discovered, Syrians are beginning to look for their loved ones underground. This morning, they've opened a suspected secret burial site on a construction lot outside Damascus, near one of the regime's most feared prisons. Inside, bags filled with bones and human skulls.
We found 7 bags. The 7 bags, there is a written code names of prisoner. A prisoner number blah. Prisoner number blah.
Each of the bags was labeled with the number of a prisoner.
According to what we found, this.
But no names.
The brand of the bag, it was a flower from Argentina, for example.
They were burying human bodies inside flower bags.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Syria's civil defense volunteers, the White Helmets, famous for pulling survivors out of the rubble of Assad's bombardment of the rebel-held northwest, are now working across the country to help secure grave sites.
What do you think has happened to these bodies when you discover them? What condition are they in? What has been done to them?
I think they were prisoners. They died in the prison, and they put them here. Some of the bones were broken.
And so the fact that the bones are broken, what do you think that means?
Of course, torture.
Torture.
We need to search as Syrians to know what happened to our beloved ones.
Across the country, mass graves like these are now being discovered. Many Syrians long suspected where they were, but they weren't free to ask or look. The priority now is to securely exhume these remains so they can be identified and laid to rest, but also to gather vital evidence to prosecute those who committed these atrocities.
With more than 100,000 Syrians still missing, Ammar fears much of his country is now a graveyard.
This is also grave. This is also a grave. Look. Yesterday, I received a call from a woman, a mother. She lost her son 12 years ago. Well, he was arrested 12 years ago. And she asked me about Saydnaya because there was a rumor, there was people in Saydnaya crying under the ground. I told her no one, it's empty. Everyone were liberated. And she said, I hope Saydnaya wasn't taken. because I still had a hope before to have my son alive. But now I am sure 99% is that my son is dead.
Now that the prison has been freed, she knows he's not there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so she thinks she's looking for a body.
Yeah.
Finding dead ends searching prisons and hospitals, desperate families are now appealing to the public.
This monument in central Damascus is covered in hundreds of posters of missing men, fathers, husbands, sons. They contain the date when they were last seen before they disappeared, and a phone number if anyone has any information.
As we read the posters, people approach us with the stories of disappeared loved ones, begging for help. Hanna is walking the streets of Damascus, clutching a fistful of pictures of her son Hassan. I ask her what happened to him.
In 2012, he went out with his cousin to buy bread. He disappeared. I don't know what happened. But when they published the list of names at Sednaya prison, his was there.
Has she been able to find any information at all, I asked? No, nothing.
Without him, there's nothing left. I'm all alone.
As the country celebrates its newfound freedom after more than half a century of autocratic rule, every hope for the future is shadowed by the losses of the past. And for those still searching, the agony of not knowing is making it impossible to move forward. In the wrecked Damascus suburbs of eastern Ghouta, a solitary mourner crouches over an unmarked grave.
I want to know where my sister is. What am I supposed to tell my mother now? What should I tell her? Let's enjoy the victory? Where's the victory?
Maha is searching for her sister. She was buried a decade ago, one of the thousands killed by Assad's chemical weapons stockpile. She's no idea where, so she's chosen to mourn at this spot. Until now, it's been forbidden to search or even speak of it.
We couldn't say a word. No one inside the country could ever mention the chemicals. We were so oppressed we couldn't even cry or get treatment. She was just 21 years old. She was pregnant when she died. And all my other siblings are spread across different graveyards.
In August 2013, regime forces launched rockets containing the chemical agent sarin on 2 rebel-held neighborhoods in the Damascus suburbs of eastern Ghouta. It was the deadliest chemical weapons attack since the Iran-Iraq war. Barack Obama had warned the regime that using chemical weapons against civilians would force America's hand. UN inspectors who searched the site confirmed significant quantities of the gas had been used in an indiscriminate attack. In spite of international outrage, nothing was done to stop it happening again. With her 6 siblings dead, only Maha and her mother are left. Suffering the long-term effects of sarin without access to treatment, Maha's mother is blind and unable to walk. Maha struggles to see well and has lost her sense of smell.
I got affected by the chemicals and suffered a lot because I stayed here. There's nothing left for us. We're dead inside now. We just want things to get better from now on for the young ones. They don't deserve to live any more years of war.
We still don't know exactly how many people were killed here, partly because of the veil of silence enforced on victims by the regime, and partly because whole families were exterminated, with no one left to mourn them. Some estimates are as high as nearly 2,000 people killed in one day.
What we saw on the bodies of children, women, and men from the chemicals was unfathomable. We saw the foam coming out of their mouths, noses, and ears. There was blood coming out too, and their bodies were blue as if they'd been badly beaten.
Zuhair remembers every face, every mother and child. It was he who buried their bodies, laid 5 or 6 on top of each other in each hole, because there were so many.
Yes, they were mass graves. We put each body beside the other, covered them with sand, and then did the same all over again. People were bringing piles of bodies from everywhere. It was indescribable. We stayed there for 3 hours burying them.
Rescuing as many of his neighbors as he could, Zuhair was too late to save his own mother. As he rushed to take her to hospital, he collapsed from the effect of the poison floating through the air.
I found her taking her last breaths. There was no one to help me carry her, and I was so exhausted. I went outside and fell down. I tried to get up again and walked for about 20 yards, and then I recited my own last rites.
When Zuhair regained consciousness, his mother was dead. He lost 25 members of his own family in the attack. Zuhair and Maha want revenge for decades of suffering, But with Bashar al-Assad and his family safely in Moscow under Vladimir Putin's protection, they're unlikely to get it. The most they can hope for is to finally seek treatment for their many illnesses and to mourn their loved ones in the open at last.
What kind of butcher is he, putting all these people underneath the ground like this? What have they done to deserve this? May God take revenge on him. I wish for Bashar al-Assad not to die until he sees the agony of mothers, my mom's agony, who wakes up every day asking about her little girl.
An entire nation seeking answers, seeking justice, the man responsible out of reach. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Layla Milana Allen in Eastern Ghouta, Damascus.
As we learn more about the atrocities committed by the Assad regime, investigations are underway at sites across that country. Authorities and relatives are trying to uncover the fate of the many thousands detained and feared murdered during Assad's rule. Simona Foltine went to visit 3 mass grave locations today, and she joins us now. Simona, tell us what you saw.
Well, Jeff, it was quite grim, and these mass graves really bear witness to just how systematic the killing was under Assad's government, and the details are only just beginning to come out. The first site we went to was in Tadamun, which is a suburb in the south of Damascus, and it is known for a massacre that occurred there in 2013, alongside a series of other extrajudicial executions. Essentially, this neighborhood had been turned into a killing field, and when we went there, residents pointed us to several shallow graves that had been dug in between the homes. We saw human remains and bones sticking out of the ground, children playing on these sites. So it was quite jarring to see also how accustomed people had become to living near these mass graves, which haven't been secured at all. Now, the second site we went to was quite different. It was in a rural area close to the prison of Saidnaya, which has been, as we know by now, dubbed the human slaughterhouse of Syria. And this site is probably where many of the thousands of people who perished in Saidnaya were buried. It was a lot more organized. You could tell that the site had been planned out. It had been segregated into sections, and the vaults had been lined with concrete. So it was quite shocking to see how much planning and effort the government had exerted into disappearing and killing people. It was not really something that happened randomly or in an isolated manner. It was very much a function of the state.
How is the new government navigating this work of trying to secure these sites while starting the delicate work of unearthing them?
Well, not much has really happened on this front, and it's really too soon to start thinking about exhuming these sites, even though, of course, the relatives, they want answers, they want the remains of their loved ones. When we were there at one of the mass graves, we met 2 siblings who had just found out that their brother was likely buried in one of these mass graves, and they essentially demanded that the grave be opened immediately. But the country and the government are just not ready for that. These are crime scenes that must first be secured and then exhumed with the necessary expertise and equipment, none of which are available in Syria at the moment. And just to give you an example, Jeff, for example, the only DNA testing facility that was available in Syria was part of a research facility. Currently, the country has no capacity to be doing DNA testing so as to identify these bodies and hand the remains back to the relatives. So this is probably going to take a long time until a mechanism is put in place to start exhuming, which means a lot more waiting, a lot more agony for the people here in Syria who are waiting for answers and for closure.
Simona Foltine reporting tonight from Damascus. Simona, thank you. In our ongoing look at treating substance abuse in America, we turn now to the most commonly used drug and one of the deadliest, alcohol. Drinking kills more Americans every year than opioids or any other illegal drug. But as William Brangham reports, promising treatments that could help people curb their drinking are barely being used.
Do you want a little salad dressing?
Sure. Over the last few years, especially after she retired, Cindy Funke-Lee felt like she was drinking too much. She said nobody else noticed, not her husband or their kids, but she did, and she just couldn't stop.
Trying to dial it back on my own was really difficult. I would go through this cycle. So I would drink a little bit too much. Then I would wake up with like, okay, fine, I'm not going to drink for a while. So that night I wouldn't drink. And then it's like 2 days later, it's like, I can have a glass, and it would just set things off again.
And you could never do just one.
I couldn't do just one. It was really difficult to do just one. I would have one would make me want another one. It's like a monkey on my back. It's like I don't want to be thinking about this all the time.
One day, while driving near her home in Princeton, New Jersey,
you must be 18 to 70 and want to reduce or stop your drinking.
She heard about a study at the University of Pennsylvania that was using a long-acting version of the drug naltrexone to help people curb their drinking.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like how come I've never heard of this medication before?
Most practitioners still don't prescribe or perhaps don't even know about drugs like naltrexone.
Addiction psychiatrist Dr. Henry Kranzler was running that study.
She wanted to reduce her drinking. She wanted to be able to drink, quote, normally, meaning having 1 or 2 drinks and stopping. And that is a common complaint that people have, where there's a feed-forward effect among many people who drink 1 or 2 drinks and then go on to drink 5 or 6.
It's estimated that nearly 29 million Americans suffer from alcohol use disorder, but less than 2% receive medication to treat it. Naltrexone is one of 3 drugs approved to help people manage their alcohol use. It blocks the receptors in the body where alcohol attaches, so the pleasurable, rewarding sensations are reduced.
A good analogy is the accelerator and the brake in a car. And if there is a strong accelerator effect and a weak brake effect, you end up drinking much more than you planned or much more than is good for you. And so naltrexone can be thought of as something of a braking mechanism.
That advertisement on public radio is like, do you want to, reduce your drinking? I'm like, yeah.
Funke Lee signed up for the trial. She got her first dose. She wasn't told if it was naltrexone or a placebo, but says she knew immediately.
The very next day, made dinner, and we opened a bottle of Prosecco and sat around. I had a drink, and I knew that I just felt different. Now, all of a sudden, I'm focusing on the conversation with our friends and not thinking about, should I have another one? Oh, I better not have another one. Like, wow, I can't believe I'm not white knuckling anything. I'm enjoying it. This has to be a chemical, physical thing because I'm not thinking my way out of this. I just feel really different.
From that day forward, her relationship with alcohol has totally changed. When the trial ended, she got a daily prescription for naltrexone. It costs $5 a month. She's been on it for less than a year, still has the occasional drink or two, but says that monkey on her back is gone.
Cheers, yeah, cheers.
Drinking alcohol has been linked to a huge number of health risks, including many cancers and heart and liver diseases. In all, about 178,000 Americans are now dying every year from excessive drinking. That's a nearly 30% spike since 2016.
It's really tragic. We have a medication that helps people, and less than 2% probably receive it who could really benefit from it.
Dr. Katie Witkowitz is a psychiatrist at the University of New Mexico, and she runs an addiction center there. She says lack of knowledge among doctors is partly to blame.
There's 2 misconceptions among providers. One is that providers believe they don't know how to treat substance use disorders, that they don't have the skills or the licensure needed to treat substance use disorders, which is not true. And they think abstinence is the only way, that Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous is the only way. And so providers will just refer their patients to those mutual help groups without even trying to tackle the addiction in their office.
Witkowitz argues this attitude not only harms patients, but it also hinders drug development. She is part of a group that is petitioning the Food and Drug Administration to change its threshold for drug approval.
Right now, the FDA says a viable drug has to prevent any so-called heavy drinking days, which is more than 4 drinks a day for men and more than 3 for women.
So if you look at people coming into alcohol clinical trials looking for a medication, some of them are drinking upwards of 20 drinks a day. I mean, we have people in our samples coming in, people in our studies who are drinking 60, 70 drinks a day.
Wow.
Yeah. And so for them to reduce to 5 drinks or 6 drinks would be a huge success in my book. But according to the FDA, that would be a failure of a medication.
Naltrexone is not a cure-all. It doesn't work for everyone, and a range of studies have demonstrated mixed results on its effectiveness.
It's not like a drug that works for everybody. It clearly does not. And that's why we need more drugs.
But for 74-year-old Stephen Harbin, it did work.
What did alcohol do to your life when you look back on it today?
Well, it eventually destroyed it.
Though it took him decades to admit it, Harbin is an alcoholic. He suffered from depression his entire life and drank heavily for close to 50 years. At his worst, he said it could be 40 to 45 drinks a day. Over the years, his wife urged him repeatedly to get help, but nothing he tried, therapy, Alcoholics Anonymous, none of it worked. And then his wife simply had enough.
When she left me again, I just started drinking even more, which is hard to believe. If I was awake, I drank. And I just said, you know, I think I don't want to do this anymore. And I got my gun out and I loaded it. And I took it and I fired it into the wall. And that's when I decided, okay, I need help.
Now you are feeling more emotions, right? Kind of having more of that, you know, those changes, dealing with them, coping with them.
Harbin went to an addiction clinic run by Dr. Snehal Bhatt, who is the head of addiction psychiatry at the University of New Mexico Medical School.
The things that used to trigger urges no longer affect me.
In addition to psychological counseling, Dr. Bhatt also started Harbin on a long-acting form of naltrexone called Vivitrol to dial back his craving for alcohol. He's now been on it for 4 years.
We know from decades of science in both animals and humans that cravings are one of the biggest reasons why people go back to using a substance, and this medication suppresses it. And secondarily, if I do drink while I'm on it, I don't get as much of a buzz. I don't get as much of a reinforcement.
I just never think about liquor at all.
Is that right?
I don't. I don't have any urges, the things that used to trigger me, you know, which I can't even begin to remember what they were. I did not have a drink from that day forward.
We have these effective interventions, but they're not prescribed, right? At nearly the rate I would like to see. And then the last piece, I wonder, is this siloing that we have in our medical system culturally, where substance use disorders are something else, right? There may be moral weaknesses, there may be things for criminal justice to deal with, but they're not medical problems.
Harbin says he's grateful to have finally found something that helped him get sober, but this time is bittersweet. His decades of alcoholism drove everyone he loved away.
You know, I've been sober now for 4 years, but I don't have anybody to share it with. I've estranged everybody that was in my life.
I want to be in control and be able to enjoy, you know, having a toast like
Cindy Funke-Lee is grateful she randomly learned about naltrexone at this point in her life. She recently completed a half marathon and went on vacation to Italy. She says because her drinking isn't always in the back of her mind, she has never felt more present.
I could just enjoy my friends, family, the vacation, and it just not be there in my head all the time. And just that waking up clear-headed, oh my God, it's wonderful. I just feel like I have a lot of my life back. It's very exciting.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
Yeah, I actually think it's...
A pair of NASA astronauts who have been stuck at the International Space Station since June will have to wait a little longer to come back to Earth. as they wait once again for a new capsule to send in their replacements. NASA says astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams won't return now until late March or even April, which means they will have lived and worked in orbit for more than 9 months. We're joined now by our science correspondent, Miles O'Brien. So, Miles, this voyage was supposed to last about a week. Remind us why Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams have now been on the ISS for so long.
Yeah, talk about a holdover. It's pretty extraordinary, isn't it, Jeff? They arrived at the International Space Station on a spaceship manufactured by Boeing called the Starliner. The arrival did not go well. There were all kinds of problems with thrusters that fired when they shouldn't, things that got stuck, things that failed outright. And NASA became very concerned about whether those thrusters would do as they were supposed to on reentry, where it is very critical that they do things precisely on time, precisely as designed. They couldn't get comfortable with what was causing the problem, even though they tried to simulate things on the ground. And so in the end, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson decided it was not safe to return that capsule with human beings on board. It ended up landing without incident, but it was, in his case, Nelson's case, the better part of valor to leave them aboard. But boy, it's been a long run for them.
We know that Williams and Wilmore are veteran astronauts, but still, what are the long-term psychological and health effects of those prolonged stays in space?
There's a lot to unpack here. They are both veterans. They're both troopers. They have, completely assimilated with the crew and have been doing the tasks that astronauts do up there. But over the course of time, human beings who spend that much time in microgravity encounter all kinds of muscle and bone loss because you're not using them. Your cardiovascular system doesn't have to work as hard, and so that becomes a problem when you land. Believe it or not, Jeff, the fluids change so much. The distribution of fluids in your body is such that you get pressure on your cornea, and that can cause long-term vision problems. And then, of course, there's the psychological stress and stress in general, which can actually impede your entire system and its ability to fight off disease. So there's a host of issues that crop up. It's not unknown. There are a lot of people that have spent long stints in space. NASA continues to learn about this with an eye towards sending human beings toward Mars. But this will be one more set of data in the book.
Let's shift our focus to some broader NASA issues, specifically about President-elect Trump's nominee for NASA Administrator, Jared Isaacman. Why has he been nominated for this role?
Jared Isaacman, who is a 41-year-old billionaire who dropped out of high school and began a payments company called Shift4 now in his basement, his parents' basement, is a very close associate of Elon Musk. As a matter of fact, after NASA, he's probably one of Elon Musk's better customers. He's purchased 2 space flights so far, both of them orbital, and in one case becoming the first civilian on a civilian space flight to conduct a spacewalk. So he is a space enthusiast. He is a pilot who has collected a whole fleet of fighter aircraft and truly believes in the commercialization of space and is a big believer in the mission of SpaceX, clearly, and Elon Musk's goals to ultimately send human beings to Mars. So he comes to NASA with a strong bent toward commercialization, which is the general trend that NASA has been heading in anyway.
And Miles, I know you interviewed him before all of this for some work that you did for the National Business Aircraft Association. What does his nomination suggest about the future of NASA?
Well, clearly NASA will be heading into the commercial direction. There is no doubt about that. Some of the unknowns are what is Jared Isaacman's thoughts, for example, on climate change. A big portfolio for NASA are Earth-observing satellites, which are used by scientists to measure the effects of the climate emergency. And he said precious little about that. He did offer up one tweet not long ago where he said, it's a false choice to say you have to make a choice between space exploration and fixing the climate on Earth. Beyond that, we don't know much about that. The science mission of NASA is important. He has proposed a mission to use a SpaceX Starship to go and reboost the Hubble Space Telescope, which NASA has rebuffed. That might change. And then ultimately, Jeff, he's going to have to make a decision on whether to continue with that Boeing Starliner capsule, which brought Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore to the space station. Will it ever fly again for NASA? You could say there's a conflict of interest here, given his close association with SpaceX and Elon Musk, given that that is the alternative to the Boeing spaceship. So lots of questions about how much Elon Musk will have a say in the space program. Clearly, his imprint will be all over it one way or another, using Jared Isaacman in that role.
Miles O'Brien, our thanks to you as always.
You're welcome.
And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for spending part of your evening with us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner, and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.